Hello and welcome to this session on Italian Catholic Parish Research. My name is Suzanne Russo-Adams and I'm excited to share a little bit of information about researching these amazing records. The Council of Trent was held between 1545 and 1563. The council aimed at condemning heretical practices and sought to clarify doctrine and teachings of the Catholic Church. Some of the decrees of the council, especially sessions 7 and 24, relate to the sacraments, particularly of baptism, confirmation, and marriage. Clarifications were made, and as a result, record keeping became a more common practice of the Church. Baptism, marriage, burial, confirmation, censuses, visitations, and other records all helped priests and bishops supervise the faithful. Baptismal records were the most commonly kept church records prior to the Council of Trent. And as an example, in Carini, Sicily, the baptismal registers begin in 1530, nearly 2 decades before the Council of Trent began. So, in many respects, they were the easiest to continue keeping. You will find baptismal records as early as 1450 in Florence and 1491 in Palermo. And this could have been due to some influence of the Spanish Catholic Church that had established parish record-keeping practices as early as the mid-1400s. In the 24th session of Trent, it required that marriages be kept and enacted strict rules when it came to the process and recording of these marriages. So traditionally, a notary kept a legal record of marriages, and records were not necessarily kept on a church level. The Council of Trent turned marriages into a church matter, confining notaries to a secular role for dowries and removing them as marriage makers. The Catholic Church is the most predominant religion in Italy and has been for centuries. Because most of the population of Italy have been parishioners for generations, these records are widespread and crucial to researching families. So most of the records you will want to or need to research will be held in the Parish Archives. Parishes can move and change, and sometimes those records will be transferred to the diocese for safekeeping. In fact, after 1901, it was required that all parishes send a copy of their registers to the diocese, and that means that older records from the beginning of that parish most likely still reside in that parish. Latin is the dominant language of this record group, so you will want to and need to learn a few Latin terms and study the handwriting in order to navigate these records. Luckily, there are some helps that are outlined in your syllabus, and I will point out a few of them here. The FamilySearch.org Latin genealogical word list and Adriano Capelli's Dizionario di Abbreviature. This is a dictionary of abbreviations and terms that you may see not only in parish church records, but also in notarial records. The BYU Script Tutorial website is also a wonderful resource for parish research. The site is dedicated to helping researchers make sense of the old handwriting. Students at the university study paleography. Paleography is the study of old or ancient handwriting. The website provides some basic instructions on more modern transcription, meaning after 1500, and yes, 1500 is more modern handwriting, for Western Europe scripts or languages like you see on the slide. That includes tutorials for Italian handwriting, as well as common phrases and words and even possible name abbreviations. This is especially important for parish research because paper was limited and priests were scribing these records using quill and ink, not a ballpoint pen. Priests often used abbreviations, and let me stress, often. Abbreviations were used for names and common phrases to save time and space. There are obviously several documents that can be searched to recreate families. Some of the most crucial are baptism, confirmation, marriages, and burials. These records mark the important events of a person's life and help put together family units. The first of these crucial events was birth and baptism. The process of baptism consisted of 3 phases: baptism, the naming of the child, and the introduction of that child into the community by the child's godparents. If a child was not in danger of perishing or dying, the infant would be carried in processional from home to church by the midwife to be baptized. This usually took place as soon as possible after the birth of a child, most often the same day, and definitely within 3 days. If a parish church were far away, it could be longer, but most people lived in close proximity to a church. During the baptismal ceremony, a child was brought forward and then held by the godmother, while the godfather stood to her right, with the father of the child behind them. In the first step, the priest would exorcise the child and then baptize the child by sprinkling water on the child's head, saying, "God's creature, I hereby baptize thee in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." In the actual written record, this process is indicated by these typical phrases: "Fu battizzata in detta ecclesia per me," or that is to say, was baptized in said church by the priest, followed by the name of the cleric. Other common phrases might include "fu battizzato," "fu battizzata in questa chiesa," etc. You are really looking for a variation of the word baptism. An important part of the baptismal ceremony also included the naming of the child. This was significant because it gave the child an identity and a place within society and a marker by which individuals identify themselves throughout life. A common phrase was nomen impositum, meaning the name was placed upon the child. Children were often given more than one given name when baptized in Italy. Take note of this because they could be indexed in the parish book under any one of those names or only the first given name. Even if they were given 2, 3, or 4 given names, they were usually only known by one of those names throughout their lives. Children were named after family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc., or even saints. In Italy, a typical naming pattern is that the first son was named after the paternal grandfather, the second son after the maternal grandfather, the first daughter after the paternal grandmother, and the second daughter after the maternal grandmother. If a child of the same sex died before another child was born, that child could be named the same name. As an example, my great-grandfather Bartolomeo Gambino was the second Bartolomeo in his family. He had a brother also named Bartolomeo who was born in January of 1877 and died in March 1877 before he was born in 1878. A typical baptismal record has these elements: the date of the baptism, the place of birth or baptism, which can be inferred from the location of the parish or the book you're searching. This is usually at the beginning of the book and sometimes said in the actual entry. This is the baptismal record for my great-grandfather Bartolomeo. He was baptized on the 19th day. Years and months are most often given at the top of the page. In this case, he was born and baptized in March 1878. The term eius dem, which means the same, indicates that it was 19 eius dem March, which is written at the top of the page. Bartolomeo Scambino, this is the Latin version of the name Bartolomeo. It then says hodie natus, or born today. Ex means from, and then Ioanne, which is the Latin form for Giovanni. Et means and, Rosa Amato. Here we get the mother's maiden name, as we know the father's name is Giovanni Gambino. Not all priests will record the maiden name of the mother. We are lucky in this instance. The next term after her name is JUG, which is the abbreviation, and here are those abbreviations, conjugatus, or married, meaning the couple was married. Then we get the fact that the child was baptized, the priest's name, and the names of the godparents, which in this case, the godparents are Petrus or Pietro Gambino and Josefa or Giuseppa eius soror, so his sister, Pietro's sister. They could very well be relatives. You will want to pay attention to godparents and witnesses on documents to determine if or how they're related. The godparents are playing that crucial role of introducing the child into the community. So you can clearly see all of the elements of the baptismal process in this short baptismal record example. Crisime, or confirmations, are another document you might find in the parish. These do not always survive and do not always have a lot of information, but can be important if there are any other church registers missing from that parish. You may find children who would not be found any other way. Confirmations were administered annually by the bishop to children between the ages of 8 and 12, and sometimes these records can contain the father's name and age, and if available, the records should be consulted to see what additional information they might be able to fill in for your family. The next parish record type is marriage. Now, I mentioned this a little earlier that in the 24th session, Trent required that marriages be kept and enacted strict rules when it came to the process and recording of these marriages. Prior to the Council of Trent, it was only necessary for a couple to express their mutual consent, and the rest was taken care of by a notary. The Council of Trent reinforced some important things that you will see in the records that you research. Some of these things were the posting of banns on 3 consecutive Sundays or feast days, entering into marriage by free choice, the marriage being performed in front of at least 2 witnesses, parental consent, and of course the reinforcement that marriage was a sacrament, a matter of church business, and ultimately a communal right. The marriage process included a betrothal followed by several documents and questions that included providing or obtaining the baptismal certificates of the bride and the groom, ensuring that parents granted their permission, signed statements acknowledging mutual consent, the dispensing of any impediments, the reading of banns, and then ultimately the marriage itself. Marriage typically took place in the parish of the bride. This was to avoid those clandestine marriages and to ensure, as the Council of Trent reiterated, that marriages were taking place by mutual consent and were legal. As a result, banns were posted in both the parish of the bride and the parish of the groom. Also, contrary to what some may believe, the median ages for men and women to marry in Italy in the 1800s and even later was 21 for women and 26 for men. Based on historical studies, brides and grooms tended to find their mates in close proximity to where they lived or worked. This also could depend on where they lived. An isolated town versus a seaport or a small village versus a more urban area could change those dynamics. If either the bride or groom was from another parish, that should be noted in the marriage record or in other records related to the marriage, such as the dispensations or marriage files, which are held at the diocese and not on the parish level, like the actual marriage books. This is what a typical marriage might look like. The date of the marriage at the top of the document, in this case that is the 9th of August 1838. You will then get the dates the banns were read, July 20th, 22nd, and 29th. The fact that there was no impediment to the marriage, meaning no challenge based on the banns being read. Think of this similar to, if anyone has objections to this marriage, let them say it now or forever hold their peace. Impediments could also be discovered during the process of being interviewed by parish priest or the bishop. You will then get the names of the bride and groom with their birthplaces or residences and their parents' names. So Joseph or Josephum equals Giuseppe Conigliaro, son of Vito and Anna Manino, and Rosaria Giordano, daughter of Giuseppe and Francesca Buffa. Depending on the priest that wrote the document, you may or may not get the maiden names of the mothers of the bride and groom. In this case, they are there, which is wonderful. More clues that you have the right family and are on the right track in your research. In case you're wondering, the document does say the couple were both born in Carini. You may also see terms like in this case, archipreto or archpriest interrogavit, or question the couple. That means that all their pre-marriage documents are in order and they answer the questions asked in the marriage petitions or packets. Another term you might see would be et mutuo consensus. That is to say that the couple is doing this by mutual consent. The last type of document I want to share with you are death and burial records. In 750 AD, it was common to bury people in the churchyards. So in more ancient times, it was common to bury people in the churchyards. They were sanctified, cared for, set apart for that purpose. However, a burial ceremony could be conducted by the person's own parish priest, a layman, or any number of other parish priests associated with religious orders or confraternities. Where a person was buried oftentimes depended on rank and status. That means that someone could be buried outside their own parish. These sorts of things could be designated in a will. However, most people chose to be buried in their own parish. According to historian Edward Muir, at the Council of Trent, Catholics reaffirmed the rites, but transformed them from a last chance sacrament aid for the remission of sins to an anointing of the sick. Burial records took longer to become sort of uniform after the reforms of the Council of Trent because it wasn't explicitly stated what information was to be included on a burial. By the mid-17th century, most parishes across Europe were not only complying by listing the information noted above on a burial register, but they would also provide information about when last rites were received and sometimes even how many masses were performed for the person. So you get on a death or burial record, date of burial and or date of death, place of burial, the name of the deceased, and they might include the parents or current or former spouse, indicating that those last rites were received. This is an example from Borriana in Biella, Italy, near Milano in 1842. Simple, but gives us some good information such as the date of death, the name of the deceased, their age at death, where born and residing, parents' names, and on this death record, even the names of their grandfathers and the fact that those grandfathers were deceased. On civil and parish documents, you might see the word "fu" before a name. That term "fu" means was and indicates that a person was deceased. It is not a title or a part of the name. These are examples of parish indexes. In my research, I've seen a variety of indexes for parish registers. It was ultimately up to the parish priest to determine how he wanted to organize the records. So they could be indexed by the first name, the last name, with an index at the front of the book or the back of the book. I've seen multi-year indexes, but my ultimate favorite, and it took a second or two to figure this out, was an actual baptismal book that was indexed by the name of the father. I had to find all of the births related to the name of the father and then look up each child's baptism one by one. As was said previously, parish records are held in the parish. In Italy, parish priests were required to make duplicate copies and send those to the diocese after 1901. If that parish became defunct, you may find the records of the previous parish in a newer, larger parish or in the diocesan archives. FamilySearch.org has filmed or digitized something, and now it may not be all of the parishes in the diocese, from about 20 of the 225 dioceses in Italy. So while not a lot, there are some church records available on FamilySearch.org, and there may be some other records online via diocese websites. One example is the Diocese of Firenze that has digitized and put some of their records online. Most often, though, you will need to write or visit the parish in the town where your ancestors are from in order to research these records. Now, keep in mind, these are private archives and you may not be permitted to research in the records yourself. Hiring a professional researcher may be one of the only ways to access these records. Now, I wanted to also share with you, take a few minutes to share a case study with you to show how church records can be used, especially as you sort of cross from using civil registers into church records. The research objective here is to locate any information regarding the origins of Matteo Russo and Maria Lucido from Cerpeto or Balestrate in the Palermo province of Sicily. We want to locate any births, marriages, or death records for this couple, and if possible, extend the line back further. Previous research revealed that this couple had 8 children, their births beginning in 1805 and extending through 1825. Parish and civil records were used to determine their dates and births and baptisms. So a search for births resulting from the marriage of Matteo and Maria Lucido revealed several children recorded in the baptisms of Sant'Anna Parish in Balestrate. No other birth records or baptisms were found in that parish. but civil records in the area revealed 4 more children. So civil records don't start until 1820 in Sicily, so it is impossible to find civil birth records for Natale and Crocefissa, who were born, I estimate, about 1816 and 1819. Their son Natale Russo married Margherita Bologna in 1838, and both parents were living at the time of that marriage. The father, Matteo Russo, though was deceased by the marriage of his last son, Giuseppe, in 1849. So we can surmise that Matteo Russo died between 1838 and 1849. So we make a search of the civil death records for Balistrate between that time period for the death of Matteo Russo. His death record was found in 1844 and indicated that he was born in Terracini. And so just for reference, Terracini is about 24 kilometers from Balistrate. If you delve into the history, and this is important to look at the history of the areas, you find that in the late 1700s or early 1800s, several families moved from Terracini and settled in Balistrate or Trepeto to farm and to fish. So Maria's death record was also found in civil records in Balistrate, and she died in 1855. It says that she was born in Partenico. The locality of birth and residency is important for a woman because it could give us a clue as to where the couple was married. Now, death records do have the most potential for error because that person was obviously not there to tell officials when and where they were born. Oftentimes that information comes from others who may not be as familiar with the earlier years of a person's life. Based on what we have learned from the civil registers, we know that we have the potential to search 3 parishes in Balistrate, Terracini, and Partenico. And so we're looking for their marriage prior to when we know their first child, Antonino Matteo, was born in 1805. We are lucky that all 3 of these parishes have been previously filmed by FamilySearch and are available online. They're part of a project with the Diocese of Monreale in Sicily and are available online on FamilySearch.org. So all 3 parishes were searched with no marriage located for Matteo and Maria. However, a marriage between Matteo and a Katharina Palazzolo was discovered in Terracini, and that marriage resulted in the birth of 2 children. You may notice something here. Both children were named Antonino Vincenzo, cluing us into the fact that the eldest child, born in 1798, died before the second son was born in 1802. We also know that this first wife must have died prior to Matteo's marriage to Maria, and that the death was discovered, and her death was actually discovered in the records of Partenico in 1802. So we now know that we are looking for a marriage between Matteo and Maria between November 1802 and September 1805. We are searching again in Partenico, which is the most likely place, and nothing. All is not lost, though. We need to expand our search, and there are a few ways to do that. We can search all the records we can about the children of Matteo and Maria to see if there are any other clues or information in their documents. Remember that we have those 2 children that were born before 1820 civil registration that we also can't find baptisms for in Partenico or in Balistrate, even though earlier children were recorded in Balistrate and later children were discovered in civil registers there. So the big question is, were parish records lost, or were they attending another parish in the area? And we don't know. Let me assure you, though, again, there's still hope. After Napoleon was no longer in power, civil registration continued in southern Italy. So Sicily specifically began that practice of civil records in 1820. And at that time, Ferdinand I, the king of the 2 Sicilies, introduced a few changes to the format of the records for marriage record information regarding the date of marriage in the church is recorded along with the date of the marriage on a right-hand column of the marriage document. And so the civil record is an act of solemn promise to marry, and then the actual record or marriage is performed in a parish church and recorded on that form. So in the 1838 civil document, it says that Maria and Matteo's son Natale was married in 1838 in the Parrocchia di Sicchiara. This is simply another dialectical name for Balistrate. So that's good to know. Now you may be thinking, but my family is from northern Italy. I don't have these acts of solemn promise or civil registration in this time period, but you may have church records for your area. And further, in some areas where civil registration stopped before the unification of Italy, parish priests made duplicate copies of parish registers, one for the parish and one for civil. Some of those duplicate parish registers were deposited at state archives in Italy, and some have actually been digitized by FamilySearch.org. So additionally, there are civil marriage files that we can consult. These are wonderful packets of information, and they're commonly called, and they're patterned after those marriage supplements that we talked about earlier. They're commonly called allegati matrimoniali or processetti. These marriage packets or files contain the birth or baptism extracts for the bride and groom, and these are civil documents, as well as copies of death records for any of the parents of the bride or groom. Natali's 1838 marriage file has a copy of Natali's baptismal record. That's great news. You will recall that Natali is one of the children we don't have an exact birth date for, and just that he was born about 1816. Finding this baptismal record gives us an idea of where his family was living in those few years, or at least which parish was nearby. The extract of his parish baptism says he was born in Val Guarnera Regali, and this is a neighborhood of Partenico, and the parish was Maria Santissima del Rosario. This happens to actually be a parish that was not filmed by FamilySearch, but that's okay. At least we have a lead as to where Matteo and Maria's marriage could have taken place, and I'm just happy to know that we know when Natali was baptized and born. So my conclusion, because brides are married in their own parishes, could this be Maria's home parish, or simply another parish they attended convenient to their home at the time? Maria's civil death record indicated that she was from Partenico, and this particular parish is in the Partenico area. It is possible that this was the parish they were married in, but it's necessary at this point to write to the parish, hire a professional, or try to visit the parish. If records are not available on film or online, you could quickly reach the point in your parish research where you need to write or to visit the parish. So I hope that this has been an informative session and that you're enjoying your time with RootsTech Connect. Thank you.